I know a lot of hay has been made about this, but I want to talk about the Epstein files. Why we're seeing what we're seeing, why people think this is a good thing, why they think it's a bad thing, why some people feel elated and others completely disappointed, and how it's basically just sowing resentment. And there's so much to this, there's so many moving parts that if you want to understand the full picture, you'll have to stay till the end. So let's break down what's going on because there's so many things going on. You can talk about this many different ways. You can see it in terms of a political frame. What is the political connections involved? How does this affect things like who's in power and what that power is being used for, right? You could look at it economically. Oh, this guy's tied in economically with the Rothschilds and also with Wexner and all these other people, right? You can look at it as a psyop. Oh, he's secretly Mossad and whatever, right? Or you could look at it as, this is how the elites live versus how the normies live. It's, well, maybe that's one of the best ways. And the thing is, you can also make it about different things. So aside from the framing, you can take any one of those frames and you could say, oh, this is how the political elite enables human trafficking. Or this is how the political elite uses or allows themselves to get away with immoral behavior of some kind. You could look at it as, oh, all these wealthy people are doing this thing. Money corrupts, which is a weird situation to be in since pretty much everyone's trying to get more money. So what is it? What are you saying about it? So you're trying to corrupt yourself? Not a helpful way to think about connections. This power corrupts. Of course, then is power money or not money? Is it a political office or not? Epstein didn't have one. Maybe he was blackmailing people. Sort of hard to know, right? Or how power really works. So power works behind the scenes. These people have their own networks. They skirt the law, on and on and on. But the thing is, especially with this release, there's a bunch of papers, and the FBI has these papers already. And so, did you think this through when you wanted this information released? What is it that you were expecting to happen? So let's think about this, we'll say critically, or it's really just thinking. There's no such thing as critical thinking. The FBI has these papers. The government has this dossier on this guy. He was already put in prison, and everybody wants all the information released. Why? What is it that you're going to do with that information that the FBI hasn't already done? Like, were you expecting them to change the thing that they had already done based on, or not done, based on the release of information? As though information itself is going to change the world? This is a very common problem. This is part of what I call the age of Gnosis, where knowledge is the highest value and knowledge is just propositions, right? And propositions ultimately is not knowledge, it's just information put into the form of a very flat language. There's other forms of information that are not language, or we may call them language, but they're not words. But papers on Epstein are pretty much just words. So you have this words as changing the world. And this is not unique to Epstein at all. This is the same problem as UFO files. It's the same thing. Oh, we're going to release the UFO information and then everything's going to change. But why? Why would anything change? Let's suppose we release the UFO files and aliens have been here all along, and the lizard people are the ones that built the pyramids, and they brought the pyramids around the globe, which would be a completely unnecessary way to explain pyramids, but whatever. I'm not going to buy any different food. I'm not going to do anything different day to day. I'm not going to think about politics nothing's going to change in my life at all. Even if you had, we'll say, propositional evidence, maybe emails or whatever, that said that was true. Now we're starting to get into the weeds of, wait a minute, when somebody sends an email, what does that mean? What's in the email? What about these random emails that don't have email threads to them, but seem to be follow-ons from conversations that were had on the phone or something? Oh, because, and I do, of course, have a video on this, words don't contain meaning. Meaning is a function of content, which are words. In most cases, they can be other things, plus context. What you don't have is the context. Because when you have a bunch of printed out emails, you may have some threads, but you don't have context for that. Two people involved in a play might be acting out their characters over an email that was prearranged, and that thread would look very strange to you. Might look like they were committing crimes or something. So what is it exactly you were expecting to happen? The authorities that prosecute people for legal violations already had this information and had already done everything they were going to do on it. So why did you think you getting access to them was going to change anything? You're nobody. Nobody even knows that you exist in the FBI. Who cares? FBI doesn't care about you. And why would they? You're like, unless you're like making bombs or, you know, gathering for terrorist activities within the United States, like, why do they even know who you are? So what is it that you were expecting to happen? And you need to ask that for all the people talking about this. What were you expecting when they released the papers? As we're thinking about what caused this, well, roughly speaking, I'm just going to call it the great evil of the world, democracy caused this. And the thing is, the elites that released the papers are like, we did the investigation, which is true. I mean, you're finding evidence of the investigation the FBI did, and releasing the papers will show everybody that we didn't have anything to prosecute people with, which is true, by the way. And that's actually really easy to prove if you just understand a little bit about the law, do a tiny bit of research, maybe just once ever. That would be great, right? And the thing is, in releasing the papers with science, it enables your fantasy. You can use science to glue together those papers to say whatever you want them to say. There's a restaurant named Cannibals in New York City, or there was. I would imagine that the cutesy people that run a restaurant with a stupid name like that would have pretty sort of morally reprehensible and obnoxious menu items on it. And if people were talking about that restaurant, they'd probably use those terms because that's what's on the menu. Does that mean they're eating children? I don't think so. And the thing is, the fantasy that's being enabled by these interpretations, because they're all interpretations of incomplete sets of information. That's what this is. And that's not because there's forbidden knowledge or missing data. It's that emails can't tell you a lot, guys. I mean, at the end of the day. It's because the age of Gnosis, with knowledge being the highest value, and knowledge is basically squished down to, or flattened to propositions, this will lead us to a legal means to destroy or replace people in the hierarchy. That's what you were looking for. That's what everyone was looking for. These people are a little, didn't think this through, unfortunately. I mean, the hierarchy is not going to release something that destroys itself, right? And the thing is, if you just thought about this for a little bit, crime as such isn't often, if ever, prosecuted based on emails. Someone needs to have a victim. That victim needs to be identifiable. Somebody needs to be motivated to go after that and then prosecute the crime based on some credible evidence. And sadly, saying I killed so-and-so in an email phrased in an admission isn't a crime, and it's not something somebody can be prosecuted for. You'd have to prove that they did it, and they weren't just saying that tongue-in-cheek or saying that because they're mentally ill and people take credit for crimes that they don't do all the time. It happens all the time. And it might spark an investigation, right? But again, Epstein had already been investigated and thrown in prison. Like the guy that did the trafficking is in the prison. All the people that may have benefited from the trafficking weren't breaking any laws unless they were in a particular state in the United States and there was an underage girl and that they knew she was underage. There's a lot of things you'd have to prove, none of which are going to be in an email. They're just not going to be in those emails. It's not going to be there. And even if they were, that's not sufficient evidence to take somebody to court. It just isn't. I'm sorry. And it never was going to be. So the question is, why did you think this was a big deal? And we can ask ourselves, why did the hierarchy release this information? What perspective do the people in the Trump administration, will say, have on this thing? Like, why would they do this to themselves? Because it hasn't been good for anybody. I mean, this has been a disastrous information release. So let's contrast, just say, the hierarchical perspective of the people higher up who did the release and the normie perspective, which is called the normie perspective. That's you. That's the conspiracy theorists. That's all of us who aren't actually in the government. If you don't work for the government, you're in the normie perspective. I have to do this, right? I have to do this. And it's true, right? They had previously released the JFK files, and it worked. It basically dispelled all the JFK conspiracies instantly. Why? Because they were all confirmed equally in the papers. Every single JFK conspiracy you ever heard had some element boosted in the release of the JFK papers. It didn't bring it to a resolution. It didn't give us certainty on who killed JFK or even how he was killed, depending upon who you want to listen to, right? It doesn't do that. That didn't happen. And so here we have another conspiracy set of papers to release. And it's perfectly reasonable to think, well, we did it last time, and all it did was dispel the conspiracies and quiet things down, and nobody came with pitchforks and torches. Well, let's do that again. Yeah, okay, that's perfectly logical, reasonable, rational way to think about this. So they released the Epstein papers. They've had nothing but blowback. It's been a complete disaster, right? But they're kind of untouchable. Like, if you believe the hierarchy exists and that they're the elites, they're not going to go after their own. That should have been obvious. What were you expecting? Were you really expecting something different? Because you shouldn't think about these things if you were expecting anything different than what happened. Because this was obvious. I was telling people this for a year plus. Like, now, more information about this is only going to make it worse. And because all you're doing is flattening the world to a bunch of, propositions about things that may or may not have happened in places that, maybe there's access to them, maybe there's videos. But the problem is, people don't understand how the law works. I hate to break it to everybody, but there's no federal age of consent in the United States. So unless you're in a particular state or territory with a particular age of consent law, and as I pointed out earlier, you'd have to prove the person knew that the person they were engaging in relations with was underage, right? You'd have to prove that. That's a very difficult thing to prove at the end of the day, because an 18-year-old going out with a 60-year-old guy is not illegal in any state in the United States, and it's certainly not federally illegal. The problem is with federal, they don't have a low number on that. It doesn't exist. You can look that up. I mean, I did, just to be sure, but I knew that before. I knew that years and years and years ago. And, you can talk about the Mann Act, right? As across state, a Caribbean island is not across state lines. And if you go from another country to a Caribbean island, even if it's under the jurisdiction of the United States, the federal government, though, that's not illegal at all. There's nothing illegal about that. There's no laws on the books for that. Sorry. You might be able to get them on trafficking charges under certain conditions, but there's no law about flying children over to other countries. People do that all the time. That's not illegal. People who aren't their parents do that all the time. And sometimes the people are bad people, and that's human trafficking. But most of the time it's not. Thank goodness for that. Let's all be grateful for that. But there's a flattening of the world is somehow going to give you equal access to the information that the elites have. Who cares? You're not in the FBI. You're not a prosecutor. There's nothing you can do about it, right? And that's going to give you sort of equal access to justice, which you see as a form of power over the elites. That's really what's going on for a lot of these people, if not pretty much everybody that's thinking about this. I never spent any time thinking about this. I have no doubt that very powerful people do very, very bad, immoral, evil, and wrong things all the time in a way that is not illegal. I understand this inherently. I know some people like that. Happens all the time, all over the place, always has my whole life. I don't expect it to change. Also, you know who else does that? Poor people. You know who else does that? Middle class people, upper middle class people, lower middle class. In fact, it's kind of all kinds of people all throughout the socioeconomic system, all throughout the British class system, and the caste system in India. Like, these are just human universals. They're horrible. They're horrible, but flattening the world to get justice, to have power over the elites, that doesn't even make any sense. So again, what were you expecting to happen? Because I was expecting this to happen, and it's happened exactly the way I thought, and I'm not surprised one bit. This isn't the first, second, or third time I've seen this in my life. This has happened many times before. It always begins and ends the same way. Although, honestly, except for JFK, I thought JFK was going to cause more stir-up, and it didn't. It just shifted the attention to aliens, really, at the end of the day. We're also talking about a class of people that cares about these sorts of things. They're all conspiracy theorists of one form or another, or they're on the path to being conspiracy theorists. And the Epstein files are just going to make more conspiracy theorists. There's going to be more ancient alien, lizard alien believers in the next year. And the thing is, part of this illustrates some of the other ancillary problems. And look, I'm not trying to be complete about this. I don't think I can. I hope I can't, because I don't want to see this whole thing for sure. There's a lot here. But one thing you can see is this idea, it's a very autistic idea, that law is the highest value and the solution to these problems, right? Like, once we get rid of the corrupt elites because we put them in jail, the elites are going to put the other elites in jail, even though they're all friends and they know each other. I don't think so. That'll solve some problem, and housing prices will go down, and I'll get a better job, and I'll become a programmer, even though AI's taking all the tech jobs away. This is ridiculous level of legalism and autism combined, right? It's a form of fundamentalism, right? Because again, we're still stuck in these flattened world of propositions, and somehow these propositions, or knowing them or having them or understanding them or putting them together in a certain way, changes something about the world, which hasn't so far. There's another trope, which is hierarchy is bad. Like, power is bad, and these powerful people are bad because they're doing bad things. And again, I mean, a lot of that evidence isn't there. It's not in what's been released so far. I don't think it's going to be. I don't think the forbidden knowledge that proves the bad thing is there. I really don't. Like, you got to understand too, the hierarchy, although mostly they understand each other better than they do from people from, quote, lower classes or lower situations, or however you want to frame it, they still are friends, but also they still have fights within themselves, right? Like, the Republicans don't like Trump. The Democrats don't like Trump, even though Trump's basically a Democrat. That's why the Republicans don't like him. He's a Clinton-era Democrat. Hasn't changed, right? They still fight. And so all this gets used for, as it has been used for, is a bludgeon against your political enemies. And the reason why that's only happening in the UK right now, seemingly, is that they have a culture with inherent moral standards, which the United States almost never had, ever. This trick in politics about, oh, this guy's gay, has never worked in US politics, or rarely, not never, rarely worked. But it's been tried, right? Or, oh, you're a Catholic, you can't be president. All of these things have been tried in US politics, and they've never worked, because we don't have the same style of moral foundation. That actually might be the problem that we're going through right now, by the way. And so that never worked as a political bludgeon. But in the UK, it sure still does work. It sure does. And they only need hint and allegation to go off their moral virtues and values. They only need one picture of a young enough woman with the former prince to dethrone him effectively, take him out of. That's all they need. In the US, that doesn't work. It just doesn't work. I mean, they keep trying it with Trump. It still does. Trump, is definitely gave a sum of money to a hooker. No one cares, guys. We just don't have that moral foundation in that way. We have other things going on, but not that. And the hierarchy is not bad. And so overthrowing them or overturning them is not going to work. You need a hierarchy. You can't just get rid of it, and you can't replace it with the people of your choice, because if you're the kind of person that thought that the Epstein files were going to do that, you're not the guy. You shouldn't be playing in that space at all. You don't understand any of it. I hate to say that, but also, like, wow, like, didn't happen the way you thought for sure. What are you doing? Why are you still thinking about? Think about something else that you have way more control over. And the thing is, this is a psyop. It's absolutely a psyop. There's no question about it. It's a hidden psyop of flooding yourself with information that you cannot act on. You have no power or control over it. You have no influence over it. You have nothing to do with it whatsoever. It's not useful or valuable to you in the least. All it can do is confirm an existing bias that you have and get you in a disagreement with another person, or help you find another person who's as crazy as you are. That's all it can do. But you did that to yourself. No one psyoped you. You psyoped yourself. That's the hidden psyop. That's why it's hidden. And that's the sad part. Your unconscious mind did that to you. You did that to you. Part of you did that, tricked you into paying attention to something that was never going to have anything like the impact you thought, but was only going to have negative impact on you and the people around you. And that's really important to understand, because nothing was ever going to change. The forces that could have made the change are giving you the information. If they didn't act on it, you're not going to force them to act on it. That's not going to happen. Ever. Now, I've been through this before because I'm old. Don't get old. It's terrible. And like this, Microsoft years ago was in an antitrust case, and they were going to throw Microsoft out of the country. And I could not have been a happier person. I've never been happier in my life than when I thought that was going to happen. And they were like threatening the United States, threatening the United States government. Bill Gates threatened the United States. I was there. I remember. And he goes, we're going to move our whole operation to Africa, some country in Africa. And I was just like, do it. That's a fantastic idea. Take your entire headquarters and move it to Africa. Think of all the things that wouldn't have happened in terms of wokeness had Microsoft left the country. This would have been a boom. And you know what happened? Bill Clinton had the Justice Department open the case, make the charges, and either had it before a court or immediately dropped the charges so that no one could ever reopen the case again. And even though Microsoft was clearly a monopoly and has clearly done more damage to the computer industry than any single person has done to any other industry in history, by far, no prosecution. And they colluded, the two bills colluded to help each other out. I was there. I watched it happen. Did I think something was going to happen to the Epstein files? No, I've seen this movie before. I know how it ends. Of course not. If there was something prosecutable, Biden would have hidden it, but it already would have been done, or maybe not him, maybe somebody under him. And maybe even in spite of his direction. That's the swamp, right? The bureaucrats that don't do what they're told. I got news for you. You get an organization with lots of people in it, a bunch of them aren't going to do what they're told. That's how the world is. So the real question here that we're left with is, what happened? What are people really asking for? What is it that we're missing about this file release? What happened here? It's very simple, guys. It's really very simple. What people are asking for with the release of the Epstein files is the return of a universal moral authority, not a political one. Now, maybe they don't understand what a moral authority is or how it works, right? But effectively, the crimes are not legal or political in nature for the most part. There might be one or two unprosecuted crimes somewhere, but it's nowhere near the scale that people are talking about, right? But they know these people, and they're correct about this. Like, I don't want to, like, I don't like these people. I wish half of them were dead for sure. I'm just going to tell you, they're not good people. I don't want them around. I certainly don't want them having money. I think that's bad. But we don't have a mechanism, even in law anymore, to take that money away, to take that power away from. We don't have it because we don't have a universal moral authority. That's what people want. They want to take the money and the power away from the bad people. I agree. Let's take money and power away from bad people. A number of people in the Epstein files are bad people, not from what's in the Epstein files, from any number of things that, in some cases I actually know about, and a bunch of things I suspect or have heard about that I kind of believe. Fair enough. I mean, I can't research everything forever, and I'm not going to research a bunch of things. So, but I would like a moral authority. That would be great. And so unconsciously or subconsciously, you want a moral authority to remove the power and usually also the money. And my argument would be, yes, you have to seize their assets and throw them in prison. That would be my methodology in many cases for a bunch of things, not just Epstein level things, we'll call them, but a bunch of things like stealing people's houses or taking estates or generally looking the other way during legal violations that affect the country, like immigration violations. I'd have a bunch of people stripped of their assets and thrown in prison. Let me tell you, I got all kinds of standards on that. That's why I'm not in charge. But you want a moral authority, but you don't want the religion. But religion is all about morals and moral authority, not philosophy. Philosophy has nothing to do with that. I hate to break it to you. Ancient Greeks knew this and wrote that rather explicitly. So if that's what you think, and I know that's a very common it's almost a universal misconception. We'll say post-Enlightenment or probably post-Reformation is closer to the mark there, but it's not true. The ancient Greeks, they don't talk about ethics and morals much at all, really. And when they do, they refer to the gods because they understood that's religion does that, not philosophy. But all we have is philosophy, and that can't justify moral behavior or invalidate behavior as unethical. It can't do that. People can use it to do that, but they have to set a standard. The standards come from the religion, come from the religious beliefs. And so, on the one hand, we don't want the baggage of the religion. But on the other hand, we want the moral authority of the religion. And we want it the way we want it, to do what we want it to do. And that's a very natural response. And I think this, more than anything else, shows the breakdown of the age of Gnosis. Because knowledge doesn't get you to morality or ethics at all. It doesn't even come close. And we want to have that knowledge because that's valuable. But it just turns out that even if you know about bad behavior, if no one acts on the bad behavior, nothing changes. And so the knowledge itself does absolutely nothing for anyone. And it's the end of that, because knowledge as propositions is a form of materialism. It ends that materialism. That materialism doesn't function, doesn't do something that we deeply, deeply need inside ourselves. And so that's why calling it the age of Gnosis, right? And understanding that it's the materialism that's causing this problem, or seeing the end or the edge of materialism as a function, I think is a much more functional and safe and much easier way to understand what's going on today. And I think the Epstein files are a prime example. And it's also a prime example of the importance of caring about where you put the thing that I find to be the most valuable, which is your time, energy, and attention.